Hey, how's it going? Want to welcome everybody out to the newest episode, fourth episode of the Roberson Rebellion. So, the Roberson Rebellion, this is your guide to popular culture and gaming. I'm your host, Sean Owen Roberson, aka Rebel One, and I'd like to invite you to enlist in the Rebellion. Join me every week for live interactive episodes. Subscribe to the channel, destroy that like button, and share this channel with your friends. So I want to acknowledge everybody in the chat. Good to see you guys. Very excited for another episode. This week we will be talking about rifts. On this channel, I'm a game designer for anybody that watches this video that doesn't know. And I'm the line developer, line manager for the rifts for Savage Worlds role-playing game. But I don't want to just talk about that every week. I want to talk about pop culture, gaming, and stuff like I said in the intro. Yeah, we'll be this week we are going to be talking about rifts a bit. I acknowledge everybody in the chat. Thanks for you guys. Just talk about today. We're going to be talking about rifts. If anyone's been familiar, it's a post-apocalyptic, really high-powered RPG. It's like taking Mad Max and mixing it with the Avengers, I think, is a good way to put it. That's how I kind of introduce it to people. But let's see. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today, though, is moral choices in storytelling and how that's important depending on the genre that you're working on. A quick review, we do have some recent videos. The most popular video of this channel was my first one where I did an unboxing of a bunch of rifts for Savage Worlds products. They look, let me put this over here. The products look great. A lot of the people that backed the Kickstarter are getting their collector's editions, and it just looks great. It's awesome. So I appreciate everybody who's supporting us and our work, and picking up the games and giving us great feedback. Everybody seems to be really excited about it. So the first week I talked about that. We also announced Atlantis and the Demon Seas is the next big world book that's going to come out. And also a new 32-page supplement called Coalition Data File for Humanity. So we are looking at doing more 32-page supplements in the future. We'll see how this one goes. I hope everyone enjoys it, but it's got some really cool stuff. I think a lot of Rifts fans are going to really enjoy it. It's got rules for expanded rules for mass combat, expanded rules for artillery and airstrikes and stuff like that in your games, as well as convenient lists of coalition equipment from after the 105 PA era, so the new style equipment, as well as expanded vehicles, new character Mars types, new edges, and then a really cool plot point campaign where you get to players can play from the inside of the coalition and experience what that's like. Then the second week, I did an episode on The Mandalorian. This week's going to be touching on some similar themes because good storytelling is often nuanced storytelling, and I do like to talk about storytelling and narrative. So a lot of times when at first I envisioned that episode as just kind of talking about The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda and everything, but of course I went down the whole rabbit hole of storytelling. Last week, for the third episode, I talked about something called apophenia. If you are interested in storytelling, if you're interested in stuff like that, then I would definitely check out the video if you get a chance. So this week we are talking about moral choices, and part of the reason that came up is actually it's really a lot of things like that have come up while I've been working on the Rifts project. So I've been thinking about a lot of those things. I talked to Kevin, I've talked to a lot of other creators about it. And everyone has a little bit of their different take on games, but for the second edition of Rifts for Savage Worlds, I really wanted to focus on go back to the basics, focus on some of the basics, and also incorporate some of the feedback that a lot of players had about the game. So real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at the comments real quick here in the chat, and so I've got a comment. Nice artwork. I guess that was for the intro logo. Yeah, I'm trying to set this stuff up. I'm still new with all this streaming software, so trying to get some cool intro music by the illustrious Chronox. You can find him online. He's actually on different music sites and stuff like that. It's got some great free music and some stuff that you can check out on Spotify. Let's see. Steven Smith says he still wants to see the covers available for purchase as purchasable posters. Yeah, that would be cool. I agree with everyone else that's agreeing with that. Yeah, it would be really cool. You know, part of our license though is we license the setting for role-playing game supplements. We didn't license the a lot of products, right? That's still Palladium retains that license. So I would say if you can, I don't have my handy dandy Riffs cup isn't here right now, but they've got some great products on their site. So check that out. I don't know if anything will happen about the posters, but that would be neat. I'll see what I can do about that, or maybe something like that for future crowdfunding campaigns, like Kickstarter campaigns. Let's see. Recommend rolling back the music volume a bit more, but it's not as bad this week. Okay, well I'll see what I can adjust that right now. It's been really weird because when I try and check it out while I'm streaming, it seems to be fine, but when I hear the stream later, it seems too loud. Are you guys able to hear me pretty clearly through the microphone and all that? There's a bit of a delay on the chat, so I'll wait for a minute to see if that pops up.
Discovery used in 20 seconds to LOS T-Dress.
So I have a question about whether or not we'll be using the artillery, borrowing the elements of the artillery rules from the Weird Wars series. We did take a look at that, right? That's really great stuff. We're approaching it a little differently. So there are some significant differences that I think. Hear me 5x5. There we go. Love it. So yeah. Oh, and someone else mentioned in the chat, Palladium has really great playing cards that are really good for action decks for Savage Worlds. If anyone's unfamiliar with Savage Worlds, as you play the game, you draw from a 52 card deck, and so Palladium has some really great decks of cards that you can use in your Savage Worlds games. They're super great. So I think they add a lot, to have that old school art in there. We've really done our best to make some really great art for the new Riffs for Savage Worlds products, but it's hard to beat the nostalgia with all those great old pieces of art. So yeah, I'm going to dive into a little bit. Part of the reason I'm bringing this up is I've been asked a few times about philosophy, design philosophy, and things like that. And the more I think about it, the more it comes down to a difference in tone that you can have between different types of games, right? So the Riffs for Savage Worlds, the first edition, was, and I'll just put this out there, anything I'm about to say is not meant to bash it or be negative about it, because it was my favorite game ever, right? What I will say is that, and I got a lot of feedback from players that said similar things, that it seemed very, very black and white. It seemed very good and bad. The Tomorrow Legion, the good guys, the Coalition are evil, terrible, bad guys. And they are bad. I mean, they are terrible. But the average Coalition soldier necessarily isn't an evil person. They're just someone who's been caught up in this totalitarian machine that is taking over North America and wiping out anything arcane, or any people, any of the aliens, we call them DBs and Rifts, that inhabit the world, that they're not native to Earth, right? So they're seen as invaders by the Coalition. So in the second edition, we really put a lot of effort into going back into some of the descriptions and trying to make sure that we clearly communicated a little more nuance with what was there in the text, and maybe some of the game effects and things like that. Also, you'll notice that we explored a lot of interesting themes. I think Blood and Bane's Sean Bircher did a really great job on, and all the writers, all the other writers, but he headed up that book, and that book is kind of our spot for misfits, you know. So you've got a lot of character types that you can play as that are they're kind of on the line, you know, like the vampire or the the ethical necromancer, right? The you know, or the shifter or whatever. So that's one of those books that I would definitely take a look at if you want a little more edgy. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Campaign. Yeah, this is one of those things though that, you know, in the original presentation of the setting, some people thought it was a little too bright and shiny. I think that some people have also said the same thing about the Tomorrow Legion, whereas I agree and I disagree. I think that the Tomorrow Legion is a really great addition to Rifts. It's the main difference between your Palladium Rift setting and Savage Rifts. Otherwise, the lore should be exactly the same. But I think that, you know, part of that's just the way it's presented. I think it's great to have a faction that kind of the gathering of heroes after Plato puts out his proclamation and warning of all the different end of the world calamities that are coming for Rift's Earth, from all types of Cthulhu type things, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I think it's really cool to have kind of a gathering of heroes and a force for good, even though I don't know if in your own game, I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to try and present it as some goody two-shoes Boy Scout force. I think that it's okay to show that the characters involved in the setting can be very nuanced, right? They're not all perfect and they make mistakes. I've actually seen that in a recent game that I've been a part of, seeing, you know, some of the a mid-level commander was actually unreliable, was actually wasting resources, and was actually not making very sharp decisions. And that made for some really interesting role-playing within the context of the Tomorrow Legion. So that's something that I'd like to explore more in future products, but rest assured, this is something that I think is important. So to go back to the basics a little bit, I've got some notes here. One of the big things that we wanted to work on when we were working on this second edition was to emphasize, to me, what I think are some really interesting themes. And also, one of the other things that it sort of ties into this is making sure that we had character role diversity. So one character couldn't do everything. Characters were dialed back their power level a little bit of it coming out the gate, and give them a little more room to progress. And also everybody a chance to shine a little bit more. But some of the major themes are Americana. That comes into a lot of things that I would include with that. Subgenres include the post-apocalyptic genre from the nuclear scare especially during the Cold War. Slavery, that's a big American issue, very, very charged one, but I think it's an important one, right? A lot of Americans died to end slavery and the practice of slavery in our country, and I think sometimes that gets lost, and I think that's a really important thing to remind every generation of, right? Then I think that freedom, and what freedom is, right? Natural inborn rights as opposed to government granted rights, and the Republic. These are all really interesting things that are explored in a lot of detail in Rifts. When you start digging into it, you notice that all these different city-states or kingdoms and groups, and they all practice all different types of governments, and it's really interesting because you see a lot of these ideas competing within that setting. For me, another big one that I wanted to emphasize was survival horror, and so I think that one of the great things about survival horror is the tension that it brings to your gaming, and it needs tension in order to feel right. I mean, if Mad Max can't be Mad Max in a utopian resource abundant society or world, right? So this is the kind of thing that you need to keep your mind on. I've added a big section to the Game Master's Guide called High Octane Horror, which goes over a lot of this. So if you haven't read it, I'd say, hey, go check that out again. But these are some things that I think can really benefit your game. And if you want to explore more of the horror side of it, then you need to keep those things in mind and carefully plot it. You need a little bit of player buy-in, right? But if you want to tell those kinds of stories, then there has to be that kind of tension. There's also a cosmic horror element that even without the survival horror, there's these huge, terrible things that are threatening the setting. And when it comes down to portraying cosmic horror, survival horror, and then the last thing that I think is an important theme is human augmentation. It's really important that you don't just assign black and white morality to the characters that are involved in all these things. So the characters tell your story. Whether you're writing a novel, you're playing a role-playing game, or, and this is a fun thing, I think, to dissect when you're watching movies, right? And sometimes you wonder, why was that movie so good? Why was that movie so bad? Okay, well, some of this is how the characters explore the themes, or don't, in the case of a bad movie, or a bad piece of film or literature or entertainment. So if you want to do that and enjoy that, then you need to be looking for more nuanced characters, right? So one of the great things about a character like Darth Vader is at first you see him and he's this big monolithic evil. But as the movies progress, you start to learn more about his origins and understand his motivations. And in the end, he has a redemption arc in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of characters that you can look at this way. One of the things that has been really successful about The Mandalorian is the fact that the characters aren't perfect. Even your Republic drop trooper, Cara Dune, her character, I think I got her name right. That character, her character is on the run for a reason, right? So even though she was in the rebellion, a very elite soldier, now she's on the run for some reason, and so there's more there to that past, and you don't have to reveal all of it immediately. You don't need to just walk into a room and tell everybody the whole backstory for the character and just have an info dump. It's okay to hide these things, and I think it can be much more interesting, right? The same thing can be said about the Mandalorian himself. And so, hey, what's up, Craysel? Good to see you, buddy. So when you have characters like the Mandalorian himself, who he's also rides this gray area, and they're put into situations. This happens a lot in post-apocalyptic or Wild West genres. Again, go see the Mandalorian episode. I talk a little more about this. But these characters are challenged with making moral choices within the setting. And so when you have that in a story, that's a really powerful storytelling device, because now the characters are enacting their personal morality within the story and the world. And so I think that that's an important thing, to provide those choices and those possibilities within riffs. And that is part of the reason that you have, and if you go back and watch the Apophenia episode, the way that you make a lot of these things visceral is by making them very personal. This could be life or death, familial or sibling, or close personal relationships, right? These things all make it seem much more real and important and present. And so when you combine these different elements together, you can create really neat stories with really interesting characters. But it's more about creating the conflict, right? The dichotomy within those characters, as opposed to, this is a good guy, cardboard cutout, this is a bad guy, cardboard cutout. Those kind of villains are much more interesting. And those kind of allies are much more interesting. Can I actually trust, what was his name? The guy that ran the bounty hunting in The Mandalorian. So, I can't think of his name right now. I think it was played by Carl Weathers, but great character, because in the middle of the season, he shoots the Mandalorian, spoiler alert, and then next thing you know, he's is he an ally? Is he trying to kill them? These are great things to consider when you talk about storytelling when you run a game. It's really okay. So if you're running Rifts, do you want to have a character that the heroes can trust implicitly, or do they need to learn that sometimes they need to be a little more careful about who they trust or don't trust? So I would say be really take these things into account, create characters with some conflict, right? Some interesting hindrances, some interesting background. That we call them hindrances in Savage Worlds, but this is classic Greek storytelling where your characters are going to have their flaws. And so those are the main kind of the themes that we wanted to explore, and I think that we tried to add things like the gritty damage setting rule for mega damage attacks hitting non-mega damage targets. Well, now you've put injuries in there. The fact that it's much more common for characters to die in Rifts for Savage Worlds than in your basic Savage Worlds games. So that means that they have a choice, though, interestingly, between going out in a blaze of glory where they get to accomplish some last feat, or taking their chances and maybe they bleed out and die, or the character is mauled and maimed. So those are the interesting kind of choices, and it's really interesting to see that coming up in a game where I've seen a player make that choice, and his character died. He chose to go out in a blaze of glory. We're never going to forget his final act because it was epic, and it made a huge impact on the game, and that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the more deadly rules that we have in Rifts for Savage Worlds. It wouldn't have been as interesting if his character if his character didn't have a lot of really interesting other parties to interact with during the campaign. There were times when we called in an ally, and when they showed, we needed help, and we had met them before, we'd helped them before, but we didn't know if they were, we weren't sure if they were allies or not, so if they were to be trusted or not. So that it made for a tense few moments in the game. So things like that can really pay off if you don't just paint everything black and white. So yeah, let me take a look at some of the chat here. Some people are talking about they like the addition of the good guy organization of the Tomorrow Legion into the setting, and it tends to give players, I guess, more of an outlet for their energies and a direction to move in. And yeah, I think that can be really great. I don't think that if you enjoy more open world play, say when you're playing Rifts, I think that's great too. But I think that the Tomorrow Legion is good, and it helps for a narrative framework, because we for Savage Worlds, of course, Savage Worlds is known for great adventure content, and so we've definitely wanted to make sure that we had a good framework with which to tell a lot of great stories. So I think it's been really working for that. So I'm going to make a couple more comments, but why don't you guys start putting in any questions you might have about the Rift setting, your thoughts on, including characters like the Shifter in your game, right? Including other characters like that. What are some of your favorites? What are some you don't like? And I'll answer a few of those real quick before we end the episode. But yeah, I think part of the thing is again, it's circling back to the beginning. It's not about right or wrong. When the original design team brought Rifts into the Savage World, into the Savage Worlds, I think they did an amazing job of creating something that new players could. It was very accessible for new players, thematically and story-wise, and I don't think it was necessarily a bad idea to say, hey, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, so that people can understand it, because Rifts is a very complicated setting with a lot of depth. But as Rifts for Savage Worlds has proven to be extremely popular, and we're developing, we've developed the new second edition of it and updated the rules and had a really great Kickstarter. I appreciate everyone's support. now I think it was a great opportunity to take some of the feedback that players gave us to go in and add a little more nuance so that people could enjoy the setting and the depth that's been there all along. So I'll go ahead and go to questions now. Peter Porcaro Jr., he said, it might be a tad too early to ask, but when do you project adding Rift's setting specific dimension books? Well, Peter, that's a really great question, and I would love to do that. I think there's endless possibilities there, literally. But one of the things right now is our current license with Palladium is for Rift's Earth in the, circa 109 PA timeline. And so that of the world books and the products we're working on is really focused on that. And I think that's I don't have a problem with it personally. I think there's a lot of stuff out there. As any big Rift fan knows, there's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of books about different areas of the world, and we've got a lot of that to cover. And we're not trying to replace those old books. I encourage anyone who enjoys Rifts for Savage Worlds, enjoys the new world books, the Savage Foes of North America, the monsters we've got in there. If you enjoy the Arcana and Mysticism, Blood and Banes, Empires of Humanity, they cover basically different aspects of the Rifts genre in North America. If you enjoy the North America books, definitely go and check out. At the very beginning of the books, we have listed some of the big, inspirative Palladium books that we referenced when making the new books. So go check those out. They're great. We're not trying to replace those. We're just trying to kind of make sure that Rifts step through a timeline as things released up to the from 101 PA, post-apocalyptic in the setting, to 109 PA. And so we're just trying to make sure that we have a really clear snapshot of 109 PA so that everybody can be on the same page and understand how the world in a very concrete way. So my goal is to make sure that we finish doing that as best as we can for 109 PA. And then, we can definitely talk about other things in the future. But that's what we're focused on right now. So I think the other spin-off stuff or dimension book stuff would be really cool, but we're focused on the current license. But we have a really great relationship working with Kevin Simbita. I've met him, and we had some really great conversations. He's really awesome, and so I don't see a problem if we want to branch out a little more in the future. But there would need to be some extra discussions about content like that. Let's see. I have a question about, I've always struggled with playable vampires in Rifts. Did you guys struggle with that decision at all? Honestly, we did. It's there. It was already there in Palladium book, in the Palladium books. Okay, so personally, my family, we really liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right? So you've got a really interesting character, two very interesting characters in that series. It's really well written, it's really well done. Joss Whedon, who later of Avengers fame, right, and lots of other stuff like Firefly, Serenity. He created some really interesting characters, and one of the ones was Angel, and the other one was Spike. And so both of these were vampire characters that were really interesting to explore. And again, it's that kind of high risk, high reward. It can go really well if you're able to play the nuances and create an interesting character, or it can go really poorly. And like we say in all of our books, if you don't think that a certain iconic framework, or as in the old school Rifts we called an occupational character class, an OCC, but if you don't think an iconic framework is going to fit your game or balance it, that's your choice, that's your table, right? If you prefer to make sure that you're running a party of good guys, and they're part of the Tomorrow Legion, and they're on the straight and narrow, hey, no problem. If you want to explore some of those grayer themes, then those are characters I definitely would take a look at. Let's see. I've got some other comments here. I'm just checking these out. I have a question from the Air Bear 2000. Is the Tomorrow Legion planned to have any influence outside of North America, or are they still making those baby steps? Yes, the Tomorrow Legion is going to have influence outside of North America, but it's not going to be as, usually it's not going to be as consistent, right, as it is in North America, which it's very central. The Tomorrow Legion in their base, Castle Refuge, is very centrally located in northern Arkansas, like right on the border there with Missouri. But they are, their Tomorrow Legion expeditions. This is when we have these books, we're going to be assuming that you're going to be in expeditions, especially exploratory teams, or otherwise. Maybe they went there for a call for heroes. For instance, say the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in Africa or something. So the books were all going to be written from the perspective that the players are adventuring as part of the Tomorrow Legion, all the core books. Not that we couldn't do other supplements where that might change a little bit. Like, for instance, the new 32-page module that I mentioned earlier, the Coalition data file for humanity. It's going to explore what it's like enlisted in the Coalition military and seeing all the craziness that ensues. Mel Primus asks, any of the Legion leadership listed in the book you think would be a good choice to have a selfish motive for being there? I would say not. Probably not out of the Legion members, the leadership that's listed in the books. They're pretty high up, and I think most of them are pretty cool. But I think that if you wanted to in your campaign, you can do whatever you want, right? There's some really cool things there. In the future, I would like to work on a supplement. Working title, I don't even know when or exactly if and how it would happen, but I'm really excited. I am really excited to do something like a Secrets of Castle Refuge supplement where we could explore some of those themes, and just show the Legion from the inside. And when I run the Tomorrow Legion, there's different characters in the motor pool and a weapons issue, and so you get to meet all these different characters that occupy Castle Refuge at a lower level, on a more personal level than some of those high-ranking commanders. So yeah, I think that could be really great. Let's see. There, and Venanis Vinco mentions, wasn't there a northern gun dealer in there with some questions about his motives? Actually, there was, and yeah, he wasn't a member of the leadership, but he's definitely located at the Tomorrow Legion. Stephen Smith, I know you can't make any official statements. Do we have a general timeline on the Coalition files, and Atlantis and the Demon Seas? Well, I mean, you kind of know the answer. That's one of the few things I'll chop my fingers off for. So that's not something that I can really talk about, but I will say that both of those things are things that I'm actively working on. So I'll just have to leave it at that. Let's see. Question from Caleb Nelson. Any clue when we'll get towards the east? He wants some eastern adventures. So, yeah, I think that's I'm aiming at. And this isn't no official announcements or anything, but I'd like to just kind of slowly move east as we explore with the world books. But that does mean that getting to China and Japan and things like that is probably a little further down the road. Now, the Palladium material is already there. I would say with a lot of the stuff that you've got in Tomorrow Legion Player's Guide, especially Empires of Humanity has some generic equipment listings that you can use as a good starting point for what might be available in other areas. It's basically there to represent what was fairly common globally speaking technology before the Cataclysm. But there's some great Palladium books. You don't have to wait until I'm able to write them to enjoy adventures in Japan or China or Australia or whatever you want to do. So definitely check those out. Let's see. All right, so I have Stephen Smith asking, how are we looking on a living campaign? You had asked for feedback on the forums for that, but I think, yeah, people, some people responded. I've heard a lot of people mention interest in a living campaign. I am interested in doing something like that and marching the timeline forward from 109 PA. Kevin and I have discussed it, and we both see Rifts for Savage Worlds as sort of an alternate dimension. The main core breaking point between the two, between your Palladium Rifts and Savage Rifts. The only main difference right now is the Tomorrow Legion, but that could lead to, we see it as an alternate timeline. That could lead to another series of events in the setting. So I really would like to get to a living campaign. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It would be really great to have people, if we could, even if it was some sort of binary decision, have people give us feedback on when they played this campaign, when they ran this series of adventures, what was the end result? Was it A, or was it B, or was it C, right? That'd be really neat. And speaking of your moral choices, morality, and stuff in games, one of the things that I did try to add to the Empires of Humanity plot point campaign at the end is the players have a decision to make, and it's not that one they have an A and a B. There's two different factions and there's different circumstances that can entail, but and obviously all of that could be changed by the game master or their role playing in the setting. But there's there are two choices you can make, and neither one is right or wrong. So I think that's, again, if you're developing your own stories, you're developing your own games, you're developing your own characters, making sure that it's not black and white, it's not right or wrong, and there are choices or there's conflict because two different things exist within the same character, then that creates a lot of interesting dynamic stuff. Yes, Mel Primus says, in the Secrets of Castle Refuge book, if it happens, I'd like to find out more about the mysterious benefactors of the Legion. So would I, because there's a lot there. That when someone dump any, whether real life or fiction, you always wonder when someone just dumps money into something, into an endeavor or a group, especially a legion, an army. You wonder what the motivations are, where that money comes from, and whose influence is attached to it, right? So that's a really great question. Let's see. I'm gonna wait for a second, make sure I didn't miss any major questions any burning questions that fans had. And I will say, if you have enjoyed this episode, please hit like, subscribe. Please hit the bell icon, because this is really. This channel is really about being live and interacting with viewers. So I appreciate it if I got you guys here interacting with me. It's been really great tonight, chatting with y'all. But yeah, please check that out, and check out any of the other videos you might have missed. I hope you find them to be valuable. Let's see, we have one comment. And is there any chance we'll ever see stats for Lord Coke, Aaron Tarn, etc.? I don't know. That's a good question. I am inclined. We already have stats for instance, Emperor Prosek. So I would be inclined to include some stats for characters like that, because I think they could be a lot of fun to actually physically have right in your campaign. But and it's great when players can interact with high-level characters like that. We'll see. Sometimes, choices come down to, how much page count do I have? Is this, and stuff like that. So it could be tough sometimes. What hits the cutting room floor? Things that I wanted to put in Empires of Humanity that I couldn't, for instance. Thanks for Steven says, thanks for all the work and fan engagement. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's great. And Caleb says, the benefactor is a secret alternate personality of Archie who's secretly fully sentient. Well, yeah, Archie's sentient. He's just got some weird limitations on his creativity and thought processes. But yeah, that would be funny if it's like another Archie or something. Uh, but yeah, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start wrapping up the episode here. I really appreciate everyone for participating. If you missed the episode live, please leave comments below. I'd love to hear them. If you have ideas for future episodes, different things you'd like me to talk about, I'd really appreciate that. I'm looking to do, again, more reviews on pop culture, possibly video games. If you guys have any classics that you'd like to see me do an analysis or breakdown of. Also, I am looking at doing possibly more some interviews. I haven't done those yet on the channel, but I really would like to do some interviews with people like, well, I don't know if I can get Shane on here, Shane Hensley, but you know, I do know some people that work in the video game industry and the tabletop industry, and see if I can get some on here. That would be really fun. So, you know, depending on what you guys are interested in, just let me know down in the comments below. Tell me what you thought of this. Let me know if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer next week in the future, especially if you weren't able to join us live today. So I hope everybody has a really great rest of their week. You know, this whole coronavirus thing is really sad. There's a lot of loss of life and treasure, and it's really terrible. So everybody, wash your hands, stay safe out there. Enjoy your gaming. There's some really great games that have dropped, like the new Doom, really great new DLC for Stellaris if you play that game. You know, I enjoy Hearts of Iron and some other games like that, but they've got some really great stuff that's come out recently. So stay safe. Enjoy your tabletop gaming. A lot of people are turning to things like Fantasy Grounds, virtual tabletops to still enjoy their gaming with their friends. So I definitely say check that out. I was always kind of a naysayer, and recently I've become a little bit of a convert because I really enjoy it. And there's some really neat things you can do with a virtual tabletop that's harder to do on a tabletop, right? Because it's all just some digital files. So Roll20 is really great for that too. So cheers. I'll talk to you guys later.